Hello, this is Mrs. Politsky, and I have notes for Chapter 11, Testing and Individual Differences, and we're going to talk a little bit about intelligence and how intelligence is measured. So, as we go along, make sure you have your packet handy and follow along. So, how is intelligence measured? Well, the exact meaning of the term intelligence is a little distorted. Most psychologists would probably agree that intelligence involves abilities to acquire knowledge, reason, and to solve problems. They would also agree that a complete picture of an individual's intelligence must be obtained from measurement across a variety of different tasks. So, we're going to get into talking a little bit about kind of the evolution of intelligence here. And we're going to start with a guy that is probably credited, a couple of men that are credited for bringing us intelligence test. And the first man is a man named Alfred Binet, who is this guy back here with the glasses, and Theodore, should be Simon. And these men, around 1900, set about to try to figure out how to figure out where to place students in certain classes. France, where these men were from, had basically passed the Compulsory Education Act and required children to attend school. And the government needed a way to kind of figure out those who might need a little more remedial help. So Binet and Simon came up with the test with 30 problems, sampling a variety of abilities that seemed necessary for school. And this test predicted which children could or could not handle normal schoolwork. So, there are four important features that distinguish the Binet-Simon approach. Binet-Simon interpreted the scores on their test as an estimate of current performance, not as a measure of an innate intelligence, meaning a kind of a God-gifted intelligence. They wanted the test scores to be used to identify children who needed special help, not merely to categorize or to label children as being bright or dull. They also emphasized that training and opportunity could affect intelligence, and they wanted to identify as areas of performance in which special education could help children identified by their test. They constructed the test empirically, so we have a scientific base here, on how children were observed to perform rather than trying to test to a particular theory of intelligence. The scores were expressed in terms of mental age, and that is the average age at which individuals could achieve a particular score, and also by an individual's chronological age, that is their actual number of years, their actual birth age. So, American psychologists did borrow upon Binet and Simon's idea. A psychologist imported this test of school abilities and changed it into the form that we now call an IQ test. The appeal of intelligence testing here in the United States, there were a few forces behind this, three of them specifically, kind of at the beginning of the 20th century that conspired to make intelligence kind of the gold standard. And first was that the United States was experiencing a very large wave of immigration as a result of global economic, social, and political crises. Also, there were new laws requiring universal or compulsory education of children, so all kids had to go to school, so there were lots of children flooding our school systems. And the third wave happened with World War I. The military needed a way of assessing and classifying new recruits. And so intelligence testing was kind of what came about here. One consequence of the large-scale group testing programs in the U.S. was that the public came to accept intelligence tests that they could accurately differentiate people in terms of their mental abilities. Another unfortunate consequence was that the tests were used to reinforce prevailing prejudice. So when we talk about like our immigrants, many of them who couldn't read, a lot of the tests were in English, and they tended to score lower on that. The Army also reports Our reports suggest that the differences in test scores were linked to race and country of origin. The Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale. Stanford University professor Lewis Terman studied and developed a scale known as the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale. Some of this is leaning on the works of Alfred Binet. And the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale kind of became the standard by which measures of intelligence were going to be judged. Terman introduced the concept of the intelligent quotient, a term that was coined by German psychologist William Stern in 1914. And the IQ was a ratio of a person's mental age, or MA, to their chronological age. These would be divided and then multiplied by the number 100. Okay, intelligent quotient, this is a numerical score on an intelligence test originally computed by dividing a person's mental age by chronological age and then by multiplying that by 100. The new Stanford-Binet test became very popular in clinical psychology, in psychiatry, and also educational counseling. And the Stanford-Binet became the gold standard of intelligence testing, and it had many critics. And the largest objections was that it employed an inconsistent concept of intelligence because it measured different mental abilities. IQ testing today. Today we use primarily what is known as the Wechsler test. And you might hear a little bit about the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or the WAIS, or the Wechsler Intelligence School for children, or it would be basically the WISC. The Wechsler Preschool Primary Scale of Intelligence, the WPPSI. But David Wechsler offered family tests that measured many different skills that were presumed to be components of intelligence, including vocabulary, verbal comprehension, arithmetic abilities, similarities on how things were alike, digit spans, and also block design, which you kind of see down here below, looking for how patterns kind of work together. The Wechsler tests are individual tests, and they tend to be given to one person at a time, but there's also some that are available in a group format. The group tests are pencil paper and involve booklets of questions and can be scored by computer. So problems with the IQ formula. You know, when an individual kind of ages, when they get beyond their kind of childhood years, from mid to late teens, individuals' gains in mental ages are usually leveled off as people develop mentally in different directions. Mental growth, as measured by the test, appears to slow down, and psychologists quickly realize that this paints an erroneous picture or an inadequate picture of adult mental abilities. Adults develop in different directions, which your IQ scores do not necessarily reflect. So, psychology in our life, what can we do for an exceptional child? Well, let's talk a little bit about who kind of makes up our exceptional children. A lot of times we talk about mental retardation, but you know, a lot of times today, the kind of preferred term is to use the phrase intellectually challenged. But these are individuals who are kind of at the lower end of the IQ scale, roughly the lower 2%. Individuals who score 30 points below the average. So if 100 is the average for IQ, then roughly 70 or below would be kind of the area or the range that we're talking about. More sophisticated definitions take into account individual levels of social functioning and other abilities. On the upper end, we might talk about giftedness, and this is conceived as representing the upper 2%, 30 points above the average, so 30 points above 100, so that would be roughly 130 points. And many of these are individuals who also have kind of different talents and certainly different intellectual needs than those people who fall kind of in the normal range. So Mental retardation or intellectually challenged people, the current view about this is to de-emphasize the IQ score and focus more on the practical abilities that will help individuals get along in the world. And according to this new perspective, mental retardation involves significantly sub-average intellectual or intelligence that becomes apparent before the age of 18. It also involves limitations in at least 18 of the following different areas, such as communication, self-care, home living, social skills, community use, self-direction, health, safety, functional academics, leisure, and work. So some of the causes of mental retardation, it could be genetics, such as Down syndrome. It could also be because of environmental factors, fetal alcohol syndrome, certain accidents, deprivation or neglect can all contribute to this. Dealing with mental retardation, some forms of mental retardation have some preventative measures. So for example, PKU, which is kind of a developmental disability, there are certain tests that are performed on infants to indicate whether or not this disorder is present. If it's detected early, usually it's can be prevented by kind of a special diet. Special education programs can also help those individuals who develop mental retardation to learn vocational and independent living skills. Interventions that begin early have the greatest payoffs. Psychological approaches that involve sensory stimulation and social interaction can be very helpful. An enriched environment may also be helpful. And behavior modification programs have also been proven to be helpful as well. Giftedness, we're looking at the top 1 or top 2%. Lewis Terman, who we talked about just a moment ago with the Stanford-Binet test, did a lot of research on this group of individuals, and he had a large pool of children who tested in the state of California, and he selected over 1,528 children who scored near kind of the top, I should say, the top of the range for scores. There we go. We'll have you put that in that place. His longitudinal research, meaning that he conducted the study over a long period of time, followed these individuals from childhood into adulthood. These children, they went through school and into adulthood, and periodically he retested them and gathered other information on their achievements and adjustment patterns. What Terman found is that these gifted children excelled in school. And Terman also remarked on the good health and also the happiness of these individuals that he had sampled. There is newer evidence that suggests that the highly gifted children are susceptible to certain physical and also psychological disorders. As they moved into adulthood, the gifted group continued on a path of success. By middle age, more than 86% of the men in Terman's sample had entered into a high status profession. No one in the high IQ sample achieved the level of like Einstein or Picasso or Martha Graham, nor did any of the high IQs turn out to be a guarantee of wealth or stature. Many of Terman's studies led to a lot of these individuals led very ordinary or undistinguished lives. So, dealing with giftedness, if a child happens to be tested and they are found to be gifted, you don't need to rush out and enter them into any kind of special classes or to provide them any, extraordinary help because of their IQ. Parents can destroy the spark of curiosity by kind of pushing their child towards certain goals that do not hold the child's interest. You have to avoid making the child feel like a freak because of their unusual abilities or high IQ. Many gifted individuals go unrecognized by schools because they have an outstanding talent that shows up primarily in arts and music domains, in which formal ability testing is rarely done. A high IQ is no guarantee of a high level of motivation. Thank you very much.